I woke up from emergency surgery to find a text from my wife of 18 years. I've taken what I'm owed. Don't come home. Below it was a screenshot of our joint savings account. Balance $0. $84,000 gone while I was unconscious on an operating table. I read the message twice, then smiled. She had no idea what she'd just done to herself. My name is Marcus Webb, and this is how my wife's betrayal became the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm 47 years old. Been married to Linda for 18 years. We met at a medical conference where I was presenting research on emergency trauma procedures. I was an emergency room physician at Mercy General in Denver. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep covering the mountain region. Beautiful, smart, charming, in that polished way that comes from knowing how to work a room. We had what I thought was a good marriage. No kids. Linda never wanted them. Said they'd interfere with her career. I didn't push it. My work was demanding enough, saving lives in an ER that never slept. We lived comfortably on my salary, traveled when we could, bought a nice house in Cherry Hills Village, but looking back, there were signs I'd chosen to ignore. Linda's increasing focus on money, her complaints about my long hours, the way she'd started questioning every financial decision I made, despite not contributing much to our household income. Her sales job paid well, but nothing close to a physician's salary. The emergency that changed everything happened on a Thursday morning in March. I was in the middle of my shift when the pain hit sudden, excruciating, radiating down my left arm. Classic heart attack symptoms that I'd seen 1,000 times in other people. Never thought I'd experience them myself. I need help, I managed to say to Sarah, the nurse at the station. I think I'm having a cardiac event. The next few hours were a blur. EKG, blood work, cardiac catheterization showing a 95% blockage in my left anterior descending artery, the one we call the widowmaker. Emergency surgery was the only option. I remember calling Linda from the pre-op area. She was in Salt Lake City on a business trip, wouldn't be able to get back until evening. I'll be fine, I told her. It's routine. They do these procedures dozens of times a week. I'm scared, Marcus, she said, and her voice sounded genuine. What if something happens? Nothing's going to happen. I'll see you when you get back. Those were the last words my wife spoke to me as the person I thought she was. The surgery took 4 hours, triple bypass, more extensive than they'd initially planned. When I woke up in the cardiac ICU, it was nearly midnight. The nurses said I'd done well, but I'd be in the hospital for at least a week. I reached for my phone to call Linda, let her know I was okay. That's when I saw the text message that would end my marriage. I've taken what I'm owed. Don't come home. Below it was a screenshot of our Wells Fargo savings account. Balance $0. Our emergency fund, vacation money, the down payment we'd been saving for a cabin in Vail, all gone. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting to feel something. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. Instead, I felt strangely calm, analytical, like I was examining a patient's chart. She'd shown me exactly who she was, and now I knew what I was dealing with. I called Wells Fargo from my hospital bed, spoke to the fraud department, explained that I'd been in emergency surgery, unconscious, while these withdrawals occurred. Sir, I show the account was accessed using the correct login credentials and security codes, the representative said. Was this not authorized? My wife accessed it, but she did so while I was incapacitated during a medical emergency. I understand this is difficult, but since Mrs. Webb is an authorized user on the account, technically she had the right to access these funds. Even while I was unconscious in surgery. A pause. Sir, you might want to speak with an attorney about this situation. I hung up and made another call. To my brother David, who lived in Boulder and ran a successful construction company. Marcus, how did the surgery go? Linda called me earlier. Said you were in the hospital. Surgery went fine. David, I need to ask you something. What exactly did Linda tell you? Just that you'd had a heart attack, were having surgery. She seemed pretty upset. Where did she call you from? I assumed the hospital. Why? I told him about the text, about the money. David was quiet for a long time. Jesus, Marcus, what are you going to do? I'm going to handle this the right way. But I need a favor. Can you come pick me up when I'm discharged? I won't be going home. Of course. Whatever you need. The next morning, my cardiologist, Dr. Reynolds, came by for rounds. We'd worked together for years, had a good professional relationship. How are you feeling, Marcus? Physically, much better. Otherwise, well, that's complicated. I told him about Linda, about coming home to find everything gone. He listened without judgment, a skill you develop in medicine. I'm sorry, Marcus. That's unconscionable, especially given the timing. Dr. Reynolds, I need to ask you for detailed documentation of my surgery timeline, my condition before and after, for legal purposes. He nodded. I'll have my office prepare a comprehensive report. And Marcus, I'm recommending at least 2 weeks off work. Your body needs time to heal, and stress is the last thing you need right now. That afternoon, David arrived to pick me up. We drove to his house in silence, both of us processing what Linda had done. David's wife, Karen, had prepared the guest room, stocked the refrigerator, treated me like family should. Have you heard from her? Karen asked over dinner. No, and I don't expect to. What's your next move? I looked at both of them. I'm going to find out exactly what I'm dealing with, and then I'm going to respond accordingly. That evening, I called an attorney friend, James Parker, who specialized in family law. We'd known each other since medical school. He'd gone to law school instead of residency. Marcus, I heard about your surgery. How are you feeling? Better. Thanks. James, I need legal advice. My wife cleaned out our accounts while I was in surgery. Jesus. How much? $84,000 from savings. I haven't checked everything else yet. You need to document everything immediately. Bank statements, medical records, timeline of events. And Marcus, don't contact her directly. Everything needs to go through legal channels now. The next day, I began my investigation. Started with our financial accounts, checking every bank, every credit card, every investment. Linda had been thorough. She'd taken everything she had access to, which was substantial since we'd shared most accounts for 18 years of marriage. But she'd made a critical error. In her rush to grab what she could, she'd forgotten about several accounts she didn't have access to. My retirement account from the hospital, a small investment portfolio I'd managed separately. Most importantly, the life insurance policy and disability insurance through my work. I called HR at Mercy General, spoke with Margaret in benefits. Dr. Webb, I'm so sorry to hear about your surgery. How are you recovering? Thank you, Margaret. I'm calling about my disability insurance. Karen leaned forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that someone who steals money from their spouse while they're having life-saving surgery isn't someone who makes good long-term decisions. Over the next few days, I began to piece together a more complete picture of Linda's actions. I hired a private investigator, Mike Sullivan, who'd done work for the hospital in workers' compensation cases. I need to understand what my wife was doing while I was in surgery. I told him where she was, who she was with, what her state of mind was. Mike worked fast. Within a week, he had answers that changed everything. Dr. Webb, your wife wasn't in Salt Lake City on business when you had your surgery. Where was she? Here in Denver. At the Brown Palace Hotel, with a man named Richard Thornton. I recognized the name. Richard was a regional sales manager for the pharmaceutical company where Linda worked. Married, with kids. How long has this been going on? Based on credit card records and hotel stays, at least 8 months, maybe longer. Mike slid a folder across the table. There's more. The money she took from your accounts. It wasn't just sitting there. She transferred most of it to a new account, opened 2 weeks before your surgery. Account she opened with Richard. I stared at the bank documents. She planned this. It gets worse. She told people at work that you were having marital problems, that you'd been threatening divorce, that she was afraid you'd leave her with nothing. The betrayal was deeper than just the money. Linda had been building a narrative, positioning herself as the victim before she became the perpetrator. What's your recommendation, Mike? Document everything. Your attorney is going to want this for the divorce proceedings. But Dr. Webb, there might be criminal implications here too. That evening, I called James with an update. He listened to everything, asked pointed questions about timing and amounts. Marcus, this isn't just divorce material. What she did could constitute elder abuse under Colorado law. Elder abuse? I'm 47. The law covers exploitation of vulnerable adults, including those who are incapacitated due to medical emergencies. Taking $84,000 while you were unconscious in surgery absolutely qualifies. What does that mean? It means we have options beyond just divorce court. We can pursue criminal charges, and we can use the threat of those charges to our advantage in the civil proceedings. 2 weeks after my surgery, Linda finally made contact, not directly through her attorney, a woman named Patricia Collins, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics in high-stakes divorces. The letter was professionally written, but the message was clear. Linda wanted a quick, quiet divorce. 50-50th split of assets, citing irreconcilable differences. No mention of the money she'd taken, no acknowledgement of the timing. I showed the letter to James. She's hoping you'll just want this to go away quickly, he said. Hoping you won't fight because you're still recovering. She's wrong. Good. Because I think we can do much better than 50-50ths, given the circumstances. James filed our response the next day. We weren't just asking for the return of the stolen money, we were seeking damages for financial exploitation, emotional distress, and Linda's breach of fiduciary duty as a spouse. We wanted the house, the cars, and most of the remaining assets. More importantly, we filed a complaint with the Denver District Attorney's Office regarding the potential criminal charges. The response from Linda's attorney was swift and panicked. Patricia Collins called James within hours of receiving our filing. Your client is being unreasonable, she told James. Mrs. Webb was acting within her rights as a joint account holder. While her husband was unconscious during life-saving surgery, James replied, I think a jury will find that timing significant. This doesn't need to be adversarial. We can work something out. Then your client should have thought about that before she cleaned out their accounts while he was on an operating table. Meanwhile, I was slowly returning to normal life, daily walks as part of my cardiac rehabilitation, regular check-ins with Dr. Reynolds, dinners with David and Karen, who'd become my anchors during this period. But I was also planning, using my medical leave to research everything about Linda's actions, her affair, her financial schemes. Knowledge is power, especially in legal proceedings. 3 weeks after the surgery, I got an unexpected call from Linda's boss at the pharmaceutical company. Dr. Webb, this is Janet Morrison from MedPharm Solutions. I wanted to check on your recovery and also discuss a sensitive matter regarding Linda. I'm recovering well, thank you. What about Linda? We've become aware of some irregularities in her expense reports and client relationship management. Given your medical expertise and reputation in the community, I wanted to speak with you before taking any action. It turned out Linda had been falsifying expense reports, claiming business trips that were actually romantic getaways with Richard. She'd also been sharing confidential client information with him, potentially violating federal healthcare privacy laws. What are you planning to do? I asked. We're considering termination, possibly criminal charges depending on what our investigation reveals. I appreciate you calling me, Janet. I should mention that Linda and I are in the middle of divorce proceedings related to financial misconduct on her part. I see. Dr. Webb, would you be willing to speak with our legal department about what you've discovered? 2 days later, I was in MedPharm's offices, sharing everything Mike Sullivan had uncovered. Linda's affair, the stolen money, the timeline of events. Their legal team took notes, asked questions, began connecting dots between her personal misconduct and her professional violations. Dr. Webb, the chief counsel, said, "This information is very helpful. We'll be terminating Linda's employment immediately and pursuing all available legal remedies." As I left their offices, I realized Linda's world was collapsing from multiple directions. The divorce proceedings, potential criminal charges, and now loss of employment with possible professional consequences. The next move came from an unexpected source, Richard Thornton's wife. She called me directly, having gotten my number from the hospital directory. "Dr. Webb, my name is Susan Thornton. I think we need to talk." We met at a coffee shop in Cherry Creek. Susan was a teacher, seemed like a genuine person caught in the same betrayal I was experiencing. "I found out about Richard and Linda 2 months ago," she said. "I've been watching, documenting, trying to figure out what to do." "What did you discover?" "They've been planning this for months. Richard's been talking about leaving me, starting fresh with Linda. They thought your heart problems would make you convenient to deal with." "Convenient how?" Susan looked uncomfortable. "Richard made comments about how Linda wouldn't have to worry about alimony if the surgery didn't go well." The implication hit me like a physical blow. They'd been hoping I wouldn't survive the surgery. "Susan, have you documented any of this?" "I recorded some conversations. I know it's probably not legal, but I was scared. We need to get you connected with my attorney immediately." James listened to Susan's recordings with growing amazement. Richard and Linda discussing my surgery, speculating about outcomes, planning their future together based on various scenarios, including my death. "This changes everything," James said, after Susan left. "We're not just talking about theft anymore. We're talking about conspiracy, possibly worse." The next day, James filed an amended complaint, adding Susan's evidence and requesting an emergency hearing to freeze all of Linda's remaining assets. He also forwarded everything to the district attorney's office. Judge Patricia Wilson presided over the emergency hearing. Linda was there with Patricia Collins, looking pale and increasingly desperate as the evidence mounted. "Your Honor," James began, "we have evidence that Mrs. Webb's actions were part of a premeditated plan to exploit her husband's medical emergency for financial gain." He presented the timeline: Linda's affair, the joint account opened with Richard, her false statements to employers and friends, and most damaging, the recorded conversations suggesting they'd hoped for the worst possible outcome from my surgery. Judge Wilson listened without expression, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When James finished, she turned to Patricia Collins. "Counselor, how does your client respond to these allegations?" Collins looked shaken. "Your Honor, these are serious accusations, but they don't change the fact that Mrs. Webb accessed joint accounts she was legally entitled to use. While her husband was unconscious during life-saving surgery, having expressed hope that he wouldn't survive the procedure." Collins had no good answer. Judge Wilson's ruling was swift and decisive. All of Linda's assets were frozen pending full investigation. She was ordered to return to court in 30 days with a complete accounting of the stolen funds. Most importantly, the court referred the matter to law enforcement for potential criminal prosecution. As we left the courthouse, I saw Linda for the first time since before my surgery. She looked older, beaten down by the weight of her choices. "Marcus," she called out as I reached my car. "Can we please talk? Just for a minute?" I turned to face her. "Talk to my attorney. Please. I never meant for it to go this far. Linda, you stole our life savings while I was having open-heart surgery. You hoped I wouldn't survive. What exactly didn't you mean to go that far?" She started crying. "I was scared. I thought you were going to leave me. So you decided to leave me first." While I was unconscious on an operating table, I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the courthouse parking lot. The criminal investigation moved quickly. The district attorney's office, armed with all our evidence, filed charges of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, fraud, and conspiracy. Richard was charged as a co-conspirator. Linda's attorney reached out to James with a plea offer. She would return all the money, accept a reduced settlement in the divorce, and plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for avoiding prison time. "What do you think?" James asked. I considered it. I want the money back, obviously. But more than that, I want consequences. What she did was unforgivable. We can push for a plea that includes community service, probation, restitution, and a felony conviction. That would impact her ability to work in pharmaceutical sales. Let's do it. The final resolution came 6 months after my surgery. Linda pled guilty to financial exploitation charges, received 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution plus damages. The divorce settlement awarded me the house, most of our assets, and ongoing financial support. Richard lost his job, his marriage, and faced similar criminal charges. His wife Susan and I became unlikely friends, through the process two people who'd learned hard truths about the people we'd trusted most. I returned to work at Mercy General 3 months after my surgery, but something had changed. The experience had given me perspective on what really mattered. I started volunteering with a legal aid clinic, helping other victims of financial exploitation. A year later, I met Sarah Chen, a social worker who volunteered at the same clinic. She was kind, genuine, nothing like the polished surface that had attracted me to Linda. We took things slowly, building trust carefully. "Aren't you afraid it could happen again?" Sarah asked during one of our early conversations about my divorce. "I'm cautious," I admitted, "but I can't live in fear of betrayal. The alternative is never trusting anyone, and that's not living." 2 years after my surgery, Linda reached out one final time. A letter forwarded through James, asking for forgiveness, saying she'd learned from her mistakes. I read it once and threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Today, I'm remarried to Sarah. We have a solid prenup not because I don't trust her, but because we both understand that financial clarity prevents misunderstandings. We're talking about adopting a child, something Linda never wanted. The heart attack that nearly killed me. The betrayal that nearly broke me. They forced me to rebuild my life from the ground up. The life I have now is better than the one I lost. More authentic, more purposeful, built on genuine trust rather than convenient assumptions. Linda thought she was taking everything from me that day in the hospital. Instead, she freed me from a marriage built on false foundations. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that could happen. I learned that love without integrity is just elaborate selfishness. That trust, once broken by someone willing to exploit your vulnerability, can never be fully repaired. And that sometimes the people who claim to love you are really just waiting for the opportunity to prove how little that love actually means. The heart attack nearly killed me. Linda's betrayal definitely killed our marriage. But both taught me that surviving isn't enough. You have to learn to live differently, better, with people who earn your trust instead of exploiting it. Sometimes the person who hurts you most does you the biggest favor, even if it takes years to understand why.